All right, we've got Court from New Province here in the studio today, and Court, you brought us this beautiful pink can, hot off the presses.
Yeah.
You guys literally canned this before coming over to the studio today. This is the Lavish IPA with lavender. You know, I haven't been drinking beer super long. I started late in the game. I was a little boy that was afraid of beer. So I didn't even have beer till I was, 22 or whatever. And of course, what most people know when they first start getting into beer, they try an IPA and they go, this is way too bitter, and I don't, it does weird things to my tongue. What is it about IPAs that is something that kind of makes people have to find their way to IPAs?
Yeah, IPAs are generally kind of an acquired taste when it comes to beer. The big thing about it is the level of bitterness in the hops that are in the beer. A lot of people find the bitterness off-putting, but it's something that generally as you try more beers, you get into it a little more. You get to where you're not as uncomfortable with that bitterness. You actually kind of start to like it.
Right.
And then a lot of the hop varieties that they're coming out with now are so much more palatable to people. You get a lot of tropical fruity characters and citrus notes that people really enjoy.
Yeah. So what makes, I guess, IPAs unique from any other type of beer? What is the brewing process for an IPA that really distinguishes it besides that bitterness and lots of hops? I mean, what's the kind of, when are those hops introduced and everything?
Yeah, so typically you have more hops that are added during the boil, and from those you get more bitterness. And then also we utilize a technique called dry hopping, which is where after the beer is done fermenting, we introduce more hops to the beer, which really give it a lot of hop flavor and aroma.
Right, and that's what makes beer is the hops. More than, I mean, obviously there's a couple other ingredients that are important,
Yeah.
but I think that's why people eventually start to really gravitate towards IPAs is once they start learning what beer can be, IPA almost feels like what beer was meant to be. Everything else is a different variation on just like adding fun sugars and flavors, but beer is like, that's the ingredient that is important to a beer. That's what's really elevating it. But we're elevating it with even more stuff today. Talk to me about trying to introduce lavender into this IPA.
Yeah, so I'd had a few lavender beers, there for a while, and a lot of them just weren't very good. A lot of them kind of tasted like grandma's perfume.
Right, I watch a lot of the Great British Baking Show.
Yeah.
And it's not beer, but every time on the Great British Baking Show, someone's like, I'm making a lavender scone. The judges are like, good try, but boy, did the lavender overpower it or whatever.
Yeah, and it's a very bold flavor. And so when I made this beer, it was originally as a home brew.
Right.
It was before I even started brewing at New Province. And so kind of my approach to it was to kind of match bold flavors with bold flavors. So when I developed the recipe, I used a Munich malt, which is a kind of a typical base malt, except it's kilned a little bit more than most malts. So it develops a little more of a complex flavor and a little more of a kind of a toastiness, a little bready character. And then the hops I used are called Mosaic. And they actually get their name because they have such a variety of flavors and aromas that come with them. And so you put all three of those bold ingredients together, and what you end up with is not something that's super bold, but rather something that's bold but balanced.
Balanced, right. So it's all about achieving that. If it was lavender and a bunch of weaker ingredients, all we would taste is overpowered lavender.
Right.
But by kicking the lavender in the pants a little bit, we were able to bring its qualities down and find something a little bit more approachable. So you've been brewing it since before you even started at New Province. What's kind of the history of this beer with you and then with New Province?
Yeah, so I brewed it at home, and then once I started at New Province, I started this series. It's called the Uncharted series, and it's a beer that we do every Tuesday. We do some kind of pilot batch of some beer, or we'll take one of our existing beers, add a little twist to it, add an ingredient or two, and just make it a little something different. Just to kind of give people something fresh, something different to drink. And so we did that as part of our Uncharted series, and people loved it so much that we ended up turning it into our second anniversary beer.
Okay,
so
cool.
when the brewery turned 2 years old, we brewed a batch of it, released it on that day, and once again, people just really enjoyed it. I mean, I guess we originally, brewed it as kind of a one-off. It was just going to happen one time. But going back to just how well it was received, we kind of felt like, we had no choice but to brew it again.
Right, gotta bring it back to
give
the public.
the people what they want.
Absolutely. Well, let's give it a go. I would
do
love
it.
to hear you talk about just the, what all I'm supposed to be tasting with this beer. We'll see how my palate keeps up with yours. I'm sure you're gonna school me on.
Oh, I'm sure you'll do fine. All right, so.
It's dark.
Yeah, cheers. Yeah, so first thing, the aroma, you automatically get some of that lavender right off the bat. Lavender is really complex in itself. You typically think of just floral with it, but if you sit there and kind of smell it and taste it, you get some citrusy notes, you get some woody notes, which pairs really well, with the Mosaic hops. And as you drink it, you kind of get some of that lavender up front, but it pretty quickly kind of transitions over to the Mosaic hops. You get some of that bitterness, you get some of the citrusy, even kind of berry notes from the hops.
So if you're gonna partner this with something, since lavender is so specific, I mean, what kind of meal are you trying to drink this with?
I think it goes back to the whole pairing with it. In creating the beer, you probably want to pair it with something that's assertive enough to stand up to it.
Yeah, it does have that typical IPA bitterness, but it's not, like you're saying, because of the lavender, it's even pulled away some of the hoppiness that most people might shy away from in an IPA. My wife doesn't necessarily love IPAs, but every once in a while I'm able to show her one and she goes, oh, that's doing something different enough. I mean, obviously it's usually the really juicy ones, but I feel like even this one you could show to someone and they can find those floral notes and those other things that aren't just pow, bitter hops right in your throat.
Right.
It's really, it finds kind of a fine middle path, between the two of them.
Yeah, IPA is, especially these days, a very diverse category of beer. You have such a broad spectrum of flavors and aromas that you can get from hops that, you're bound to be able to find an IPA that, most everybody's going to like.
Thanks for coming by, and we're excited
Thanks
for
for having
everybody to come by the tap room and give it a go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think that's a good outro? I don't know how else to. We don't have like an outro. Last time we just cut it off.